At Thanksgiving dinner, my daughter-in-law looked across the table, laughed, and said loudly, "Your cooking is always terrible. No one wants it." The whole room went quiet, waiting for me to shrink back in embarrassment. But instead, I smiled at her and said calmly, "Taste it and see who once cooked for the president." Her smirk faded, and in that moment, everyone at the table realized this Thanksgiving would not be like the others. If you want to hear the rest of this story, make sure to subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Margaret Lane, and I am 67 years old. Thanksgiving has always been my favorite holiday. It was the one day I could fill the house with warmth, food, and family, just the way my late husband and I used to dream of when we were younger. After he passed, these dinners became even more important to me. They were my way of keeping traditions alive, of keeping the family close. Every year, I spent days preparing the meal, the smell of turkey roasting in the oven, the sweet pies cooling on the counter, the table decorated with small touches of love. These things mattered to me. They were my gift to the people I cared for. But not everyone saw it that way. My daughter-in-law, Vanessa, had made it her habit to criticize me. She laughed at my recipes, dismissed my dishes, and often made sharp comments that cut deeper than she realized. To her, it was a joke. To me, it was a wound I carried silently. My son Daniel often tried to brush it off, telling me not to take it personally, but how could I not? Cooking was more than just food to me. It was my language of love. That Thanksgiving evening, the house was filled with chatter and the clinking of glasses. My grandchildren ran through the halls, their laughter making the home feel alive. I stood in the kitchen, carefully placing the finishing touches on the meal, reminding myself that this dinner was about family, not about pride. Yet in the back of my mind, I dreaded the moment Vanessa would make her remark, the same way she always did. When we all sat down and I began serving the dishes, I hoped maybe this year would be different. But as soon as the plates were filled, Vanessa leaned back in her chair, smirked, and delivered her insult in front of everyone. The room fell still, all eyes on me, waiting to see how I would react. They expected me to lower my head, to pretend her words didn't sting. But this time, I had decided I would not stay silent. The room went silent after Vanessa's words. Her laugh rang out across the table, sharp and mocking, while everyone else lowered their eyes. I could see my son Daniel shifting uncomfortably in his seat, clearly embarrassed. But he said nothing. That silence stung almost as much as Vanessa's insult. My grandchildren looked around, sensing the tension even though they were too young to fully understand it. It was the same pattern every year. Vanessa would throw her jab, and I would swallow the pain to keep the peace. But inside me, something was different this time. I had spent 3 days preparing that meal. I woke early to knead the dough for the pies, marinated the turkey with a recipe I'd perfected decades ago, and even ironed the tablecloth that had belonged to my mother. Thanksgiving wasn't just about food. It was about family, about tradition, about love passed down through generations. To have all of that dismissed with one cruel comment felt like someone had taken a knife to the heart of who I was. Vanessa smirked at me, as if daring me to respond. "Come on, Margaret," she added with a laugh. "Don't look so shocked. We all know cooking isn't exactly your gift." She reached for her wine glass and took a sip, clearly enjoying the discomfort she had created. I glanced around the table. My sister, who had come in from out of town, looked down at her plate, avoiding my eyes. My oldest grandson fidgeted in his chair, his fork poking the mashed potatoes without eating them. Daniel finally muttered, "That's enough, Vanessa," but his voice lacked strength. It was the same weak defense he always offered, words that fell flat and changed nothing. The worst part wasn't the insult itself. I had grown used to Vanessa's sharp tongue. What hurt was how everyone allowed it to hang in the air, unchallenged, as if her disrespect had become a normal part of our family gatherings. I realized then that this wasn't just about one rude comment. This was about years of being dismissed, of my contributions being ignored, of my love being treated as something cheap. As I looked at the steaming dishes on the table, I felt the weight of all those years pressing down on me. I remembered the nights when my husband and I had nothing but still found a way to put food on the table. I remembered working double shifts at the diner to save money for Daniel's college, cooking every night, even when I was exhausted, because I wanted him to know he was cared for. Food had always been my way of giving love. To have it turned into a joke year after year felt unbearable. But instead of breaking me, Vanessa's cruelty lit a spark inside me. I thought of the years I had spent working as a chef before I married, the experiences I had tucked away quietly. I thought of the prestigious event I once catered, the one where my dishes had been served to world leaders, including the President of the United States. I had never bragged about it. To me, cooking wasn't about showing off. It was about nourishing others. But now, faced with Vanessa's mockery, I knew I could no longer stay silent. I took a slow breath, letting her laughter roll off me. Inside, my decision was already made. I wouldn't lash out or meet her cruelty with anger. That would only prove her. No, I would do something better. I would let the truth speak for itself, and when it did, it would silence her more powerfully than any angry words ever could. The rest of the family began to eat, cautiously tasting the dishes I had poured my heart into. I could see their eyes widen with surprise at the flavors, but they stayed quiet, still caught in the shadow of Vanessa's cruelty. She didn't touch her plate right away, preferring to sip her wine and bask in the attention she thought she had gained. I folded my hands calmly in my lap, my face composed, but my mind steady with resolve. This was not just another Thanksgiving. This was the year I would remind my family, and especially Vanessa, exactly who I was and what I had given to this family. The conflict wasn't just about food, it was about respect. And that night, I had decided respect would finally return to my table. I sat there at the table, the laughter from Vanessa still hanging in the air, and for the first time in many years I felt no urge to hide my hurt. Instead, I felt something shift inside me. I had been silent too long, letting her words settle into the cracks of every holiday like dust that no one bothered to clean. This time, I was ready to wipe it away. I straightened in my chair and caught her eye. "Why don't you taste it, Vanessa?" I said with a small, steady smile. "And see who once cooked for the president?" The room fell even quieter. Forks froze midway to mouths, eyes widened, and every conversation died instantly. Vanessa blinked at me, then burst into laughter. "The president? Oh, that's a good one. You really expect us to believe that?" she said, smirking at Daniel, as if waiting for him to join in. Daniel shifted uncomfortably again, but he didn't laugh. No one did. They just stared at me, waiting to see what I would say next. But I didn't argue. I didn't defend. I let the food speak for itself. I rose slowly from my chair, picked up the serving spoon, and placed generous portions onto each plate. The turkey, golden brown and steaming, the mashed potatoes whipped until smooth, the gravy thick and rich. All of it prepared with the same care I had given years ago when I stood in a bustling White House kitchen, my heart pounding as Secret Service agents tasted each dish before it left the room. I hadn't told many people about that night, not even most of my family. It was one of those stories I kept tucked away, a private memory of a time when my skill had been recognized at the highest level. As I filled plates and handed them down the table, my mind drifted back. I remembered the night I got the call, years ago, from the catering company I worked for. The White House needed a special dinner for visiting leaders, and I had been chosen as part of the small team of chefs to prepare it. It had been the proudest moment of my career, standing in a kitchen where history was being made, knowing my food was part of it. And I remembered the moment when, after the meal, I was told the president himself had complimented the menu. It was something I never forgot. Now, watching my family take their first bites, I felt the quiet satisfaction of a truth finally ready to be revealed. My sister's eyes lit up as she chewed. My grandchildren, who had been hesitant at first, smiled and reached for more. Even Daniel looked surprised as he took his first bite of turkey, his eyebrows rising in admiration. But the moment I waited for came when Vanessa finally lifted her fork. She cut into the turkey, dipped it into the gravy, and placed it in her mouth with a smug expression, clearly expecting to confirm her own insult. But as soon as she tasted it, her face changed. Her eyes widened slightly, and for the first time that evening, she didn't have a quick remark ready. She swallowed, shifted in her chair, and reached for her glass of water. I leaned back and folded my hands calmly in my lap. "That recipe," I said softly, "is the same one I prepared when I was chosen to cook at a White House event years ago. The president himself ate this meal, and he didn't think it was terrible." Gasps and murmurs spread around the table. My sister clapped her hand over her mouth in surprise. One of my grandchildren whispered, "Grandma cooked for the president?" Daniel looked at me, his eyes filled with both pride and regret, as if realizing for the first time how little he had defended me against years of disrespect. Vanessa laughed again, but this time it was weaker, forced. "You're joking. You have to be." I met her gaze firmly. "I don't joke about the things I've worked for. I gave my life to this craft. I cooked for leaders, for guests of honor, for people who mattered. And every Thanksgiving, I cook for this family. That may not mean much to you, Vanessa, but it means everything to me." The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't the silence of humiliation or awkwardness. It was the silence of truth settling into the room, reshaping how everyone saw me. For the first time in years, I felt the balance shift back to me. As the meal went on, the chatter slowly returned, but now it was different. My sister asked me questions about my work as a chef. My grandchildren looked at me with awe, asking me to tell them more about the White House. Even Daniel smiled proudly as he took another helping of turkey, telling the children, "Your grandmother really is something special." And Vanessa? She stayed quiet, her fork moving slowly, her laughter gone. Every bite she took reminded her that her words had no power over me anymore. That was the moment I knew the years of staying silent were over. I had chosen dignity, not anger. I had chosen truth, not shouting. And in doing so, I had reclaimed the respect that had been slipping away one Thanksgiving at a time. The room grew still after my words, the clinking of forks and glasses replaced by silence. Vanessa stared at me with wide eyes, her smirk fading as though she wasn't sure if I was serious. My family sat frozen, all of them caught between disbelief and curiosity. I didn't press further. I didn't need to. I knew the food on their plates would speak louder than any argument. Slowly, the others began to eat again. My sister took a bite of the turkey, her face lighting up with delight. "Margaret, this is incredible," she said, her voice filled with genuine awe. She glanced around the table, clearly realizing that every dish was richer and more flavorful than anything she had tasted in years. My grandchildren followed, their small forks digging into the mashed potatoes, giggling with excitement as they asked for second helpings. The more they ate, the more the energy shifted. Daniel cleared his throat, his fork resting on his plate. "Mom, I never knew," he said quietly. His words carried a mix of pride and regret, and for the first time, I saw in his eyes the boy who had once believed I could do anything. But all attention turned to Vanessa when she finally picked up her fork again. She had no choice but to taste the food after the claim I had made. Everyone's eyes followed her as she cut another small piece of turkey and placed it in her mouth. She chewed slowly, her expression tight. She was trying hard not to show it, but I could see the realization dawning on her. The flavor couldn't be denied, the tenderness, the seasoning, the balance. It was the work of someone who had dedicated their life to this craft. She set down her fork, forced a laugh, and said, "Well, maybe this year isn't so bad." Her voice was thin, stripped of the confidence she had carried earlier. I leaned forward slightly, my smile calm but firm. "Vanessa, that recipe you just tasted was the same one I prepared when I catered an event at the White House years ago. The president himself complimented it." Gasps circled the table. My sister's hand flew to her chest. Daniel nearly dropped his fork. "Wait, you really cooked at the White House?" he asked, his voice full of amazement. "Yes," I replied. "I was chosen as part of a catering team when I was still working as a professional chef. It was one of the greatest honors of my life, and I never felt the need to brag about it." Cooking has never been about recognition for me. It has always been about giving, about love. But tonight, I realized that staying silent only allowed disrespect to grow. The weight of my words settled into the room. My grandchildren's eyes were wide with wonder. One of them whispered, "Grandma cooked for the president," as if it were the most magical thing they had ever heard. My sister smiled through tears, proud in a way only an older sibling could be. Daniel turned to his wife, his voice sharper. "Do you see, Vanessa? Do you understand who you've been mocking all these years?" Vanessa's cheeks flushed red. She looked down at her plate, suddenly finding her food more interesting than the conversation. For once, she had no clever remark, no cruel joke, no laughter to deflect the truth. She had been silenced not by anger, but by undeniable reality. As the meal continued, the mood shifted completely. Conversation turned toward my past, my years as a chef, the places I had worked, and the stories I had never shared. Questions flew across the table, and I answered them with quiet pride. My family leaned in to listen, captivated by a part of me they had never truly known. For the first time in many years, I wasn't just the aging mother or grandmother in the background. I was the woman whose hands had shaped not just meals, but memories, both for my family and for people in places far beyond our home. The more they listened, the more respect returned to the table. And with every bite of food, Vanessa's silence grew heavier. Her power over me dissolved with each forkful that proved her wrong. When dessert was finally served, Daniel raised his glass. "To Mom," he said firmly, his voice steady and proud, "for teaching us that respect is earned not with loud words but with quiet truth, and for reminding us all that she's more than we ever realized." The family echoed his toast, glasses clinking together. I felt warmth spread through me, not just from the wine, but from the recognition I had been waiting years to feel. As for Vanessa, she forced a weak smile, but the defeat in her eyes was clear. She had tried to humiliate me, but instead she had revealed her own ignorance. And though I did not need to gloat, the satisfaction of her silence was enough. That night, I realized the power of dignity. I didn't need to raise my voice, didn't need to argue, didn't need to sink to her level. All I had to do was let the truth shine, and it spoke louder than her laughter ever could. After everyone left that night, I sat alone in the quiet house, the table still carrying the scent of roasted turkey and pumpkin pie. The laughter of my grandchildren echoed faintly in my memory, but what stayed with me most was the silence of Vanessa. For the first time since she had joined our family, she had been unable to twist her words into power over me. She had mocked, expecting me to shrink, but instead, she found herself tasting a truth she could not laugh away. I leaned back in my chair and thought about all the years I had stayed quiet. Every Thanksgiving, every family gathering, I had let her barbs cut into me while I smiled through the pain. I told myself I was keeping the peace, that it was better to swallow the hurt than to cause a scene. But in doing so, I had allowed the disrespect to grow like a shadow over my table. That night, I finally pushed it back into the light. Daniel came into the kitchen while I was putting leftovers away. He hesitated for a moment, then said, "Mom, I'm sorry. I should have stopped her years ago. I should have defended you." His voice was heavy, burdened with guilt. I looked at him and smiled gently. "You were caught in the middle. I understand. But tonight wasn't about you defending me. It was about me defending myself." He nodded slowly, relief softening his features. "I'm proud of you. I never knew about the White House. Why didn't you tell us?" I shrugged, placing a container of pie in the refrigerator. "Because it wasn't about bragging. Cooking for me has never been about fame. It was always about love, about sharing something of myself with the people I care about. But when love is mocked, sometimes the truth must speak." The next morning, I received a call from my sister. Her voice was bright with admiration. "Margaret, I can't stop thinking about last night. You were incredible. I've never seen Vanessa so quiet. You reminded us all of your strength." Her words warmed me more than she knew. It wasn't just about the food. It was about reclaiming the respect I had lost. Over the days that followed, I noticed small changes. My grandchildren asked me to teach them recipes, eager to learn the stories behind each dish. My sister called more often, wanting to hear more about my years as a chef. Even Daniel seemed lighter, no longer weighed down by embarrassment at his wife's behavior. And Vanessa? She kept her distance. When I saw her again, her tone was softer, her laughter more restrained. She still carried pride, but there was a flicker of caution in her eyes, as if she finally understood that her words had consequences. For once, she looked at me not as a target for her jokes, but as someone she had underestimated. I realized then that the greatest change wasn't in her, it was in me. I no longer felt small at my own table. I no longer feared her insults or dreaded the gatherings. I had found my voice, and with it came a peace I hadn't known in years. That Thanksgiving became a turning point in my life. I didn't just serve food that night, I served truth. And it reminded me, and everyone else, that respect isn't given to you out of pity or silence. It is claimed when you choose dignity over bitterness, calm over anger, and truth over lies. When I think back now, I don't remember the sting of Vanessa's insult. I remember the taste of victory in the smiles of my grandchildren as they ate second and third helpings. I remember the pride in Daniel's voice when he toasted me at the table. I remember the way the house felt alive again, filled with warmth and admiration instead of awkward silence. I learned something important that night. Sometimes the best revenge is not in fighting fire with fire, but in showing quietly, powerfully, that you are more than what others try to make you. I didn't need to humiliate Vanessa. I didn't need to shout. I only needed to remind her and myself of the truth I had carried all along. So now, when I stand in my kitchen preparing meals, I no longer carry the weight of her insults. I carry pride, I carry history, and I carry the knowledge that my cooking, my love, and my strength have touched more lives than she could ever imagine. Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday again, not because of the food or the decorations, but because it is the day I finally reclaimed my dignity. If this story inspired you, make sure to subscribe to my channel and share in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your thoughts.